Hi, I'm Toni Williams, and welcome to Brooklyn Savvy. We're here at Bedford, Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation, right here in the Billie Holiday Theater. I know, Marjorie, you're very close to that.
Absolutely.
But what we're going to do is continue our spotlight on Bed-Stuy restoration, and I'm going to start by introducing our panel. We have Gordon Bell. Now, you're the Chief Strategy Officer for Bed-Stuy. Yes. And we have Rhonda Lewis. Now, you are with Greater Newark List.
Yes.
Excellent. And Marjorie Moon, who is the cultural champion of Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation, and of course, Colvin Grannum. So thank you so much for joining us today. So why don't we talk a little bit more about issues related to housing in Bed-Stuy. Is there a housing crisis in Bed-Stuy? I'm going to start with you, Colvin, and then I want you also, Rhonda, to weigh in on that.
I don't want to be too loyally, but it depends on how you define crisis.
Oh, let's talk about affordable housing.
Yeah,
let's
I think
talk about that.
Like the rest of the city, there's an affordable housing shortage, for sure, and it clearly resonates across the income groups, but particularly with low and moderate income residents. And we have a number of things that we're doing to try and address that. Our focus as restoration, most recently the focus has been on developing mixed income housing.
Now, when you speak about mixed income, what is it that you're speaking of?
Well, historically we were a provider and developer of low income housing, and that would be for the most needy people economically. And we built close to 2,000 units of that over a history of the organization. But recently we've been focusing on mixed income, meaning a mix of incomes, and the projects that we were working on have units that are available to people at 40% and below of AMI. And then,
AMI meaning?
Area median income.
Okay.
And that translates, I think, into maybe 20-something thousand, 30-something thousand. And then we have another group that's at 100% of AMI, which is probably, what, in the 60s or so, 60,000 of household income, and then another group that's at like 130% of AMI. So buyers in those income groups would be eligible to buy in these projects. And the thinking,
so these would be considered condominiums?
Well, the units, what we're building now are rental units.
Okay, but they're going to be able to buy in, you're saying? So I was just...
I probably used that incorrectly.
Oh, okay, buy in. Okay,
they
buy
would be able to rent there.
Right.
Yeah. And our focus is on keeping a solid middle and moderate income group in the community because there are a lot of providers of low income. Not enough, but there are not as many providers who are focused on the middle income.
But let's talk a little bit about renters, though. Meaning, does that really enhance the economic vitality of a community to have a large portion or a number of renters in it? What do you think about that, Rhonda?
Well, you know, as you develop it, it does bring dollars into the community, jobs in the community. But then when the structure is finished, it is a way to provide housing for people who are not everybody will be a homeowner. Not everybody can, but the thing is to get some of the best renters to get them vested in the building and keep it up so that they are also contributors to the community. Because again, not everybody is made to be a homeowner.
Exactly. So in terms of, though, helping people create wealth, how does one get a population that, I guess, for the most part, but maybe you can tell me this, is the profile of Bedford-Stuyvesant people that typically rent? Is that what you...
Matter of fact, we're below the citywide average with respect to home ownership. So I think we're at 20-something%, 27 or something like that, and the citywide average is above that. Of course, the nationwide average is at 67%. You would expect, at least I would have expected, more home ownership in Bedford-Stuyvesant given the nature of our structures. You know, we have low density housing that are suitable for 1 to 4 family use. So we're below the citywide average, we're below the nationwide average, and I think we'd like to see more ownership, home ownership. The projects that I was referring to earlier as rental were originally projected to be home ownership, but because the home ownership market has fallen apart over the last 8 years, or 4 years.
Right, and this is because of the recession and
That's
the
right.
foreclosures.
So
right.
almost everything that was slated for home ownership was converted into rental.
Well, you see that in downtown Brooklyn as well.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not just in Bed-Stuy.
Right. So we'd like more home ownership, and we think that when the economy gets stronger, we'll be able to promote that more aggressively. Because a lot of it, you have to get it financed, and banks need to know that the collateral is going to go up in value, not down in value.
Right. Now, there is a fair amount of publicly subsidized housing in Bedford-Stuyvesant. How do you think that plays out in what you see in Bed-Stuy in terms of income and that kind of thing?
How you want to answer that? Address that?
Well, I'm not sure where you go with
Okay,
the
what
question,
I'm saying
so-
is, okay, we've got a lot of publicly funded housing, so how is that informing what is going on in terms of the housing crisis and that kind of thing in Bedford-Stuyvesant?
I don't know if it's still a housing stock that is needed because, you know, the people who are incomes who are the renters there, they wouldn't be able to rent on the open market, and some of them wouldn't even qualify to rent in subsidized housing or, you know, the typical tax credit deals, if you will. So that is still another source of housing that is available. The thing I think that needs to be done in the public housing is that it needs to address the social services in order to make it an environment that is conducive to making it a neighborhood that's stable. That where people want to, you know, live and feel safe and have quality housing, and so it still has a lot that needs to be done with the residents there, besides just renting them an apartment, if you will.
Right.
And so I think that providing, you know, if there are other nonprofits or restoration who can provide social services to those tenants, they need a way to get, you know, again, additional services in order to have environments that's conducive to making Bed-Stuy a whole community.
You know, I think you do raise an important structural issue that can be very controversial, which is the public policy that leads to certain communities that have more public housing than others. And it really dates back historically to urban renewal and decisions that were made about whether we would have a mixed income community or whether we would have certain communities that would house most of the low income people, because decisions were made. I think we've come to look at it as a characteristic of the community for it to be quote unquote low income, but I think that there was a public policy decision behind that that we should
That
always
we're living
be
with today, essentially.
correct. We should always be mindful of, and one of the things that we've been talking about collectively is a vision for a mixed income city, right? There's no reason why there can't also be a policy decision regarding that. The mayor has done some things regarding that with these 80-20s.
Yeah, because I was going to say, what would that look like? Right, you're saying 80-20s.
80-20 is where, Rhonda, you help me with this?
80-20 is that, you know, again, it goes back to what Colvin said earlier with mixed income units or buildings. And so 20% is affordable to a certain percentage of the AMI, and 80% is affordable to another band. And each community has a certain band or income band, depending where it is.
I wish they would just tell you what the income is, because when you're talking AMI, it's like, well, what the heck does that mean, you know? Let's talk a little bit about predatory lending. Is that still an issue in Bed-Stuy as it was maybe about 8 years ago?
It's still a very hot topic. Bed-Stuy actually has been reduced a little because it is no longer the #1 place for foreclosures in the city. It used to be the highest ranking community. And right now it's, I think, East New York. Okay. But it still has a very, it has a serious negative impact in the community because, again, you have vacant properties, you have people who are displaced, children who may get displaced and no longer go to the schools they originally attended. So it not only
it's a real destabilizer.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
It really destabilized the fabric of the community and the people. And so I think people lose that aspect of it. It's not just the bricks and mortar of the building, but the people who actually live in it.
I think that there are very few predatory loans being originated
Oh,
today.
now,
Okay.
exactly.
But the effects of those subprime and predatory loans that were originated in the, like 2005, 2006 or earlier.
And there was a little bit of a moratorium on people getting modifications, and so now banks are now responding to the new laws, and so now they're actually, once again, not that these loans were originated recently, they were previously, but now they're getting actually foreclosed on the individuals living in those.
Because I'm hearing the modifications can sometimes put you into foreclosure, can sometimes back you up in that if it takes too long to get the modification, or...
A modification wouldn't put you into foreclosure unless you got modified and then you didn't pay.
Right, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. Because
Sure.
Right.
But you know, and a recent bill was passed, so people now will get a chance to have their principal actually reduced, which will help people significantly. But again, you have to be in a position to. Well, that's the modification, and again, you know, the bank or the originator of the loan would sit down with the borrower, and that person, depending on, you know, do they have a job now, they have the ability to pay, and they will be able to work out something.
Bridge Street Development, Restoration, Pratt Area Community Council, and a number of organizations, NHS at Bed-Stuy, put together a task force to work on foreclosure prevention issues, and I think we had a fair amount of success. The councilman was a strong and staunch supporter of it, so was the Assemblywoman Robinson, and because what we were witnessing was a tremendous loss of equity and wealth as a result of these loans, right? And oftentimes these homes have been in families for a couple of generations. And
then they lose them.
And they lose them. And you know, I'm not one to believe that all the borrowers were trying to get over. I think that they were trying to improve their situation, and they got in over their heads. People lost their jobs, and you know, all kinds of things happened as the economy fell apart.
You know, the people believe in the American dream, and so just like everybody else, they want to be able to have a house and build wealth.
They want to stay.
And then, you know, like Colvin said, not everybody was necessarily deceiving the banks or the institutions. It was also the greeds of the banks as well. And so right now, currently, a lot of foreclosures are really kind of based on people losing their jobs. And that's the biggest reason why people are getting foreclosed on now. Because of course the banks have tightened up their underwriting criteria.
Well, we're going to have to break, but we will be right back.